Hey, everybody, welcome back. It has been several weeks, but Dani and I are back. This is Words number 40. We are officially at middle age. We have been trying to delay it by repeatedly returning to age 36, by scheduling and canceling shows that were supposed to occur after 39, but alas, we could not delay age or gravity any longer. So Words number 40, Dani Katz, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And also, I know that I'm the one who said that we're middle-aged as well. I'm holding the vision of us going well past 80 episodes.
Yes, me too. Well past 80. I'm planning on living well past 80. I know you have a different idea about like how you want to spend your time than I do. But anywho, yes, well, I'm pretty sure you're planning to stick around till at least episode 80, probably longer. So
yes, for
anywho.
Sure.
All right. So lots of stuff has happened, but kind of over the course of this time since we did our last regular episode, like each of us are further and further coming to the conclusion that lots of things that we've been tracking for many, many years, titillating as though they are actually in large part a complete waste of time. And so, so we don't have as many stories to cover as we normally do, but we do have a couple, right?
Well, I feel like what we have is so juicy that I'm happy that we're focusing in on just the small, because I also feel like this is the crescendo, like we're in the apex of where it was leading now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so let's do this. We're going to start. We have the people being thrown under the bus segment, and then we have like an IDW regular segment and afterwards segment. So let's kind of proceed in that order. And what I wanted to talk about was like your thoughts. I certainly have some, but your thoughts on like how harshly they're throwing Cuomo under the bus.
So, I mean, I feel like do you think this was an oopsie or was this planned all along? It's hard to say because I see them throwing so many big, they tricked him. Yeah, so I see it as, and we're going to get into it, but like, I always knew when I was diving into Bill Gates last year, and we talked about this, they're going to throw him under the bus. Yeah. So it feels like one of these big players, they gave him the Emmy, he was being lauded as this hero. Yeah, I mean, I feel like right now they're throwing all their big players under their bus, preparing for a big enslavement pivot, and as a way to sort of establish their legitimacy by, giving these creeps a semblance of justice, maybe.
So I know that you felt it coming, but like, what was the thing that happened recently? Because there was something that happened recently that I can think of that let me know, yep, the throwing under the bus of Bill Gates has begun. What was the thing for you?
So these are the steps that I saw. I was hearing murmurings of, the powers that were looking into whether China had indeed created this virus in the lab. And I'm like, okay, what are they doing there? Then I saw Brett and Heather, and we're going to get into them, on Bill Maher throwing Moderna under the bus. And that made sense to me as a defensive move coming off of David Martin's incredible work exposing them as a criminal organization and all of the attention that his Brian Rose interview got. And then I saw Brett and Heather talking about, well, it is looking like this came out of a lab. So I'm like, okay, they're making it seem like they're not working for the CCP and they're going to throw them under the bus. And then the grand finale, and I know we're about to get into the Jordan Peterson, Brett Weinstein, theater, scripted interview. But at the very end of that, where there, these two academics who have their very sort of didactic and heady way of talking about things, at the very end, as like a throwaway, Brett Weinstein says, well, the one thing all these things have in common is Bill Gates. And there was no evidence, is like, Brett doesn't talk about anything without his, 3 examples and citations and whatnot. He didn't make any links. He just said, well, it's all Bill Gates. And I saw, oh, okay, so now they're throwing him under the bus.
And of course, they come from the same area. Well, not originally, but they were all up in Washington when like the beginning steps of all these operations sort of began, right? So for me, like obviously, like I've always felt like he's a bag man. He's a bag man for the system. He got himself in trouble with all of those things in the late 90s, early 2000s in relation to the net. Did you ever see that video of him trying to explain where they were asking him questions and he was like, well, what do you mean by the word the?
Dude,
Right?
those were amazing. I mean, when
Yeah.
I was writing Plandemic, I went through so many
Yeah.
old
Right.
videos, and he's a dick. He's like a little, he's
Well,
a little shit in those
he
interviews.
doesn't know what to say. He has no answer for them, and he's not able to worm his way out of it. So after watching those, not that I didn't suspect eventually he'd be thrown under the bus before, but when I watched those several months back, I was like, okay, this guy is definitely like he got himself into a lot of actual trouble, right? And they
He
found
was convicted. He was found
right.
guilty.
They saw an opportunity to, use his psychopathy to their advantage. And so
Totally.
he went to work for Mr. Global,
Yep.
right? Or whatever, as Catherine Austin Fitts would say, right? And so everything that he does, he's doing it to obfuscate who's like really behind it. And it's not that he's not disgusting and evil in his own right, right? But he's just like your garden variety, he's not particularly smart. Right?
No, he's not particularly smart,
Yeah.
but it's also been like fairly public that because he comes from an elite, wealthy family where they studied the Rockefeller family and kind of to learn how to become, giant, wealthy magnate eugenicists. So I think that he actually was mentored by the Rockefellers in these ways and was embraced in the Mr. Global family early on.
Well, because they had experience having to rehabilitate their own image in the public. And so
Yeah.
they knew there was a role they wanted to cast him in, and he had to go to school to learn how to play that role better, right?
Totally.
And to get the Mr. Rogers look going on and the, whatever, all that. Right? So then when I knew though that like, oh, this is the moment, right? So a few weeks back, well, several weeks now, I'm losing track of time. My dad calls me and says, turn on 60 Minutes. They're about to do a segment on Simone Biles, right? So I turn on 60 Minutes and I'm like, thanks, you tricked me. This is not Simone Biles. But like it was Panderson Pooper, and Billy Goat, right? And
Panderson. Did he trick you on purpose?
I don't think so. I think that they had said, like, for the previous segment, coming up, something with Simone Biles or whatever, and it just was going to be the last segment, right? But I'm glad I caught it because I never watched 60 Minutes. And I was like, this interview is so gross and so self-indulgent. Like, he is literally sitting there talking about, like, all Western countries, all rich countries have to give up meat eating, and talking about how he has created a solution to yogurt by culturing bacteria that grows under Yellowstone Park. It's some kind of microbe fungus, and he makes yogurt out of it. And
yeah, it's called biomilk. It's totally lab created, like his bullshit FDA not approved Impossible Burger.
Right. And Panderson Pooper is sitting there tasting the yogurt, like, oh, not bad. Tastes kind of like coconut milk or whatever.
He's tasting something that looks like that yogurt, right. But we know enough to know that they would not touch that shit with a 10-foot anything.
But like, to me, like, that was so far, that was so far and so ridiculous. And people they're just acting like this is a normal thing to be talking about, right? And then a few days later, I read an article that was really good, right? And it was like, I'm going to write this article about Bill Gates, and I'm not even going to go to any of the conspiracies because you don't have to. After watching him, and I can't remember where the article came from. I can't remember. So I'm not saying where it was because I just can't remember, right? That you don't even need to go to the conspiracies to prove that this person is a psychopath who has too much money and is drunk on his own bullshit. And we should not listen to this person at all. This is what happens when people get too wealthy. It crosses over into this space of like, oh, we can just remake the world or whatever. I think of something, I can make it happen. Like, I can do it because I can. And he was just
hold up, because I just want to say something to that. When people have that much money, I think it's incredibly important for us to realize it's an addiction. Yeah. It becomes an addiction to greed, an addiction to making money, and that's what's driving them is a pathology.
Right, and just this idea that because I have the money to buy the world, I should be able to, or whatever, right? Like, it's this incredible, like arrogance that
Arrogance.
no matter what anybody thinks, whether they fully believe in climate change, whether they fully believe in the nonsense from Wuhan, whether they're just like super pro-vax and they love anybody who is talking the way this man is has lost his mind. And this article is just pointing out that I can just with this interview prove to people why we should never listen to Bill Gates. I don't even have to get into any of the conspiracies. And once we're at that place where someone who is not a conspiracy theorist is like, I can make just as good of a case as the conspiracy theorist can, and I don't even have to talk about any of the conspiracies. Like we can literally do it with this 16-minute interview. Watch this. And then all of a sudden there started to be a little more criticism, right, of Bill Gates in the more mainstream or borderline mainstream. You see Jimmy Dore doing a video like, is Bill Gates really trying to help? And Russell Brand and all the people who are like the boundary guards for the left between left wing and conspiracy, when they were all like, I don't know, dude, I don't know that I can just pretend that he's a nice guy anymore and whatever, right? So I was like, okay, like his portion of the operation is coming to conclusion, and pretty much in the same week that all this stuff started to bust with Cuomo. So whatever, he's also been a bag man. He also has a family history, different but the same, right? But all this started to happen at the same sort of time. And I think that both of them got tricked, but I think like Cuomo more so. Like I think Bill Gates knew that he was doing, like while this idea of doing what he's been doing appealed to him, he had done something wrong. And in order to rehabilitate his image and to not have to go to jail or something like that, he agreed to, to play this role. I don't think Cuomo like signed up knowing it was fake. I think Cuomo thought that he was going to get to be president, or he was going to get some grand, reward.
Yeah, you can see it in their demeanor because Bill Gates has a semblance of diplomacy and like a measured, there's that like kind of hatred for humanity that comes through, but Cuomo was just like hysterical and screaming, like his disdain for his constituents. Like, I feel like you're only that off the rails when you think your shit doesn't stink.
Yeah, like he comes from a political family, part of the Democratic dynasty, right? Like that's part of it's just a different sect of the dynasty from like the Clintons or the whatever, right? The people, his family's been in it for a long time. They have part of their family in the media and part in government and whatever. But if you watch the things that he think about back to the early days, and by the way, I've already come to the conclusion that we have said enough things in here that we're going to get in trouble on YouTube. So I think let's just.
What did we say?
I'm watching what they're doing this week. It's getting worse. So I think what we'll do is I'll do the whole thing on Vimeo, and people like we can put it up for free, like on our Patreon page, or I have a locals page now, which is actually cool. It's kind of like a Facebook kind of thing, and people can go over there and be members for free. They get the paid content if they pay, but I can post it through Vimeo over there, and everybody can go over, and that's a great backup to YouTube in case we ever lose it here anyway. So I think we should do that. So we'll just record straight through and do the things. And maybe we'll do a little afterward segment or whatever. But I just was like, let's just speak freely. Let's like not even play the game, right? So anywho, so like Cuomo, think about in the early days, he was the antithesis to Trump, right? Like there was people who were like on the left who were like, govern me, baby, right? Remember those shows? And like there was people talking about this is the model of how you govern during a pandemic or a crisis or whatever, right? So literally, like he was being set up to believe that either he would be like the next president or maybe he would be like the next head of the DNC.
The fact that he got an Emmy, the fact that our culture has gone that off the rails that we give politicians awards for their fake scripted television nonsense.
But I think that's the clue right there, that these people have always been actors. They're lifetime actors. They finally won their award, and now it's time to retire. Like, so many times an athlete, after they win the Olympics or win their biggest match ever or whatever, they retire, right? So they got their award for their service to the greater movie that we are all living in, obviously, clearly, and now they're retiring those roles. Yeah. And it's just a question of like what the dramatics are going to be on the way out, right? And this situation, and I think Mr. Gates always understood that this was sort of what he was doing. I think he enjoyed, being looked at as, God and savior to all the people who did. I think with Cuomo, he really believed all along that this was real and that he was going to either be president or like some very, very important political figure that was, oh, like that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And he did. I think that there's like a ton of stuff going on here that is wrapped into it, you know, and I think he served the purpose of like making Trump look bad to people from the center, you know, certain people. He served the purpose of like they would not show Trump's press conference every day, but they would show his instead. Like they would preempt, you know, Trump's to go to his kind of stuff. So it was kind of like this shift in like, you know, for whatever people thought of Donald Trump or not, like he was like the president and he was the one who had those news conferences, and suddenly that was being upended by something in this way, right? And all of this wonderful attention to how wonderful he was doing. So they got to have the public being excited about lockdowns, excited about masks, excited about shutting down the economy. And that was part of blowing him up. Like he was doing a great, like tyranny is freedom. Like he was good in doing the whole switcheroo, mind screw flip on the public, like, you know, right? Or at least anybody who wasn't actively pro-Trump, right?
Yeah.
But also, I think that the system wanted to kill Granny, right?
Well, see, I think so as well. So do you think that the leak that ended up exposing Cuomo as a murderer was planned or was an oopsie that they didn't see coming?
No, I think that they, I don't know how tightly and perfectly this was planned, but I think this was always going to come back to get them. I think they let him write the book and make the money and win the Emmy and all of that kind of stuff. But I think this was always baked into the cake. They wanted to kill old people because they want to not pay them their pensions because they're also pretending that money is real, right? And that we're running out of money.
It also helps drive up the fake number situation.
Drive up the fake numbers, but also like if you can, like old people are expensive to a society that has Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, and because they need the people they're still trying to pretend that they're not just playing Monopoly and typing ones and zeros into computers. They're still trying to pretend that money is real. So it's important that we always have this like feeling that there's not enough money, all that kind of stuff, right? So they're not wanting to pay those pensions, right? If you listen to Catherine Austin Fitts and the level of reality she understands perfectly, because the level of reality she understands is she understands it better than any of the rest of us. Like there's just other levels that it isn't, you know, kind of thing. So this goes into that. Get rid of the old people. Right? Yeah. The old people and make it, you know, right. And then later we'll also be able to, that's not going to, people are going to get pissed about that eventually. You can't keep that secret forever. So then we can throw him under the bus. It was him who did it. And the other person that's caught up in that scandal is Whitmer, who they also used for their authoritarian means. And they made her look like she was the ice princess of, you know, she's
how do you think it serves the Mr. Global to throw these people under the bus?
Okay, so it's like they want to get rid of the old people, right? Right. And then they also want to be able to say, oh, look, wasn't that terrible? Like, wasn't it terrible that all the old people died? And so they have to have somebody who they can blame all the decisions that they made. Like they probably collectively made this decision. He acted them out under the promise of, whether it was a spoken promise or not, you're going to be president for this, right? This is the because remember, there was a boat sitting off the coast there that could have taken all these people, but they didn't want to do that because Donald Trump put the boat there.
Exactly.
Right. So like this is all, I mean, like this is serious gameplay. So all the old people are dead. So now those pensions and those Social Security and that Medicare, that's clear. That doesn't have to be paid anymore. Right. And now they can throw him under the bus. Right?
But do you think that really matters when they're printing money like nothing?
But the people don't understand that. So the people, they only want people to get upset about things which they can control to a certain extent, right? Okay.
That's why, I mean, for me, I feel like it might have been an actual oopsie that they didn't see coming and then a pivot to throw them under the bus and get behind it. I don't know. And also interesting coincidence that now 2 months later, the Washington Post is retracting their lie about Donald Trump saying go after the fraud. I feel like that's tied in as well.
It probably is, but I think that a lot of people who are in this game that did dirties because they were promised cookies, they want to throw them under the bus, right? This is no different than the Larry Nassar kind of situation, right? So Cuomo's now Larry Nassar, just like Jeffrey Epstein sort of was, or whatever, right?
Mhm.
I mean, what really happened, like, they have different ways that they deal with them. The other gymnastics coach, the one who supposedly suicided recently, right?
Right.
Like you and I both know that if someone's found suicided at a bus stop, it's because somebody suicided, and that's not the place where people generally go to commit suicide, right? He thought he was making a run for it. He went to the bus stop to make a run for it, and they got him at the bus stop, right? Like that's what that, he realized he had been used also.
Yeah.
Right? So he's a different personality than Larry Nassar, so they deal with different people differently. But basically, they're ready to be done in New York with the traditional democratic governance style. And New York is going to be where they first experiment with UBI because Andrew Yang is running for mayor and he's polling incredibly high.
Yes, that's it. That's totally it.
He's polling incredibly high, right? And so they're right. And, this money that they're going to save, not having to pay pensions and Social Security, is now going to be available because I think pensions are paid through the states, where the Social Security is a federal program, right?
Okay.
But I think pensions for it's oftentimes wrapped into the state government. I'm not sure on that. If I'm wrong, please correct me. I'm not trying to be a know-it-all here. I've just never heard my dad talk about it, and I think that, right? So I think this, we're going to be switching from pension-based sort of like state socialism to UBI, right? Okay, and so Andrew, I think part of the decision to do it now or to make the leak now, and whether the leak was an accident or on purpose, it's very synchronistic, was the same weeks, the same period of time that Andrew Yang is up very high in the poll.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. That brings it all together.
New York is like, New York, and if you also pay attention to it's the New York Fed that's suing Trump for his New York is suing Trump for something different is going on in New York, right? Mm-hmm. They have got to. There's a couple things going on. They're trying to clear New York City out. I have a lot of theories about why that is.
Did you know they shut down? No, there's no mail service in Brooklyn anymore.
They are shutting New York down because they need to get people out of the city for 5 to 7 years so they can update the city into augmented reality compatible buildings.
Okay.
Think about it. LA in the downtown area was not popular really until 10 or 15 years ago, right? And then it had a rebirth with gentrification. And whenever they gentrify these neighborhoods, they're putting in smart compatible buildings and smart compatible transportation. That shit doesn't exist in New York, except for maybe way down, Tribeca, Wall Street, Battery. That place has a lot of really high-end modern kind of stuff and whatnot. But think about how much stuff in the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side, Central Manhattan, that is old.
Yeah.
Right? They cannot retrofit those buildings for smart stuff or for augmented reality, real life Pokemon Go shit, which is what we're about to move into. They have got to get as many people out of the city as they can so they can update that for a technological future, right?
Yeah.
So you want to get as many people out of there as you can. And if people move out of New York City, they're moving out of the state. People are not going to move out of the city and stay in the state. They're going to go somewhere else for some more freedom or for some better weather or something like that. Get people out of there, not have to pay them their pensions. And the people that are going to stay, they want those people who are interested in technology. Those people are the ones who are the most open-minded to UBI and things that Andrew Yang is talking about because he
100%.
comes from that reality, right?
Yep.
So this is going to be, New York City is going to become, in my opinion, they're doing it in a few small towns already, right? They did it in Stockton, California and whatever, but that's going to be the first big city to adopt UBI. And the way that they're going to be able to afford to do that is by not paying pensions and Medicaid and things like that anymore.
Okay.
Right? So this is one idea. This is my idea, right?
Yeah, no, it totally resonates.
This moment was always going to come. Maybe it was supposed to come a few years later than it came, right? But they always knew that they had brownstoned the shit out of Andrew Cuomo. So they have him on tape doing all the stuff that these women are claiming. Trust me, they have him on tape doing it. So he's going to do, and they can pull that noose at any time. That's the purpose of doing that stuff. That's the purpose of putting someone who is a lech in a position of power, right? That's
well, they all are.
Right. But he, every step of the way, who would ever have, there is no world in which it makes sense to send sick people to an old folks home. There's
none of it makes sense. Well, I'm also curious, how do you feel like it folds into the larger crooked Dem governor conversation, because it's also happening at the same time that you have the recall Newsom, like they have enough signatures for that to happen, but it's pulling the attention away from Newsom, from Grisham, from all the other, I mean, there's the insanity that's going on in Texas right now.
Right.
But I'm just curious, like, well, I guess because you're saying because New York is going to be, like, that's the location that they want. So it doesn't matter. It's like Governor X,
Right.
Y, Z.
The location, and remember, it wasn't Andrew Yang's idea to run for mayor. People drafted him into the position, right?
Sure they did.
Yes.
I totally believe that.
Well, I think he was drafted in, but not by the Yang gang.
He's not qualified. He's never held public office. It doesn't make sense.
It wasn't governor, it was mayor. But what I'm saying is, like, there were people in the Democratic establishment who were starting to look at it and go, you know what? This isn't looking so good for us, and this is probably going to happen this anyway. Let's throw this bone out there so that, like, when we're trying to, like, okay, so there's a problem with Cuomo, we get rid of him, and our recovery is a fresh start with a new idea. And 2020 was a little too early for Andrew Yang's idea, but after the pandemic and all of this stuff, 2021 or 2022 or whenever the year is, this is the time. We need to bring technology and development and economy back to New York City. And how we're going to do that is we're going to reimagine the entire city into Pokemon Go, and people can come here, and it's going to be affordable to live in New York now because rents are down. They'll have tech jobs and they will have UBI. So they'll basically be circling the money that they're giving away back to themselves anyway. All the while people will think this is wonderful, and I love living in fucking Legoland. Right?
Yeah, I think you're 100% spot on. The only piece that feels weird to me is that it's not, this was planned the whole time with Yang. This was set up and seeded and strategized the whole time. It wasn't that, like, some random Democrats thought it would be a great idea. No, this was all part of it.
All part of the plan, just like everything which we are going to talk about, with dark web. But it was part of the plan amongst a certain level of the planning team. The whole planning team didn't know this. Because they need,
Yang himself might not have even known it, but the planning team did.
The planning team up here knew, and then on the next level, this group knew part of it, this group knew part in this group, and then down here, these people knew even less, also compartmentalized, right? And all the pieces and parts of the puzzle, they're like not necessarily, they're time dependent, and that one has to happen to unlock the other and then the other. But, like, okay, let's ride this as long as we can. And maybe what ended up happening is maybe the person who was a surprise to them was the Asian state senator in New York who started going after Cuomo. They weren't quite, they would have done it in a different manner, because this way they're actually taking away some of his power. They never want to give away power, right? So that might have been the thing that, like, pushed it to happen a little faster, right? And so they just decided, let's just accelerate this and take focus off of the nursing home scandal, because that was the one that we actually, there's a lot of the stuff with the women is bad, but it's we expect this amongst politicians. This is whatever. This is easier to control them with this. So let's make the story all the assault of women. Let's try and keep the nursing home thing quiet, because that's actually the important job where we're using it to steal money or to steal perceived money or whatever.
Slash to murder people.
Right. Yeah. Right. So that's, and to get people to think about how many people were okay with this as this was going on, right? And how many people cheered for Cuomo. Govern me, daddy, right? Like seriously, like that is like it's hard to feel bad for anybody who said, govern me, daddy, right? And those people, like, completely, like, provided the energy for this upward movement of this operation. Right? Those people, like.
Well, also keep in mind, just because this is being exposed in New York doesn't mean that it's not happening in every other state.
Correct.
But that's everyone who's saying govern me, daddy, in every state. They're murdering everyone.
Correct.
Any state where they're saying we're not going to give hydrochloroquine, they're fucking murderers. Any state where they're putting people on ventilators, they're murderers.
Correct. But this is the one that they had sort of the most riding on in every way, right? That they have, and because New York is like, it is a problem with these older cities, right? That they are not wired for smart reality. They have to do something, right? If they just try and take one building down at a time to retrofit that, that's going to take forever. Now, like I was trying to figure out what is the point of destroying the economy in New York, right? Like, what is the point? And then it finally dawned on me what the point was.
When you said Yang, that's when it all clicked in and came together. Like, yes, okay, that's exactly what's going on.
That's Yang. Okay, so I think that's the larger game at play there. This was an incredibly, like, just like all the most brilliant like false flags and operations and stuff like that, it serves a number of purposes at a variety of levels, and there's very few people who understand like the architecture that went into putting this together, kind of thing. And there's no group of people in the entire world that know how to use a really bad scandal to their advantage better than the Democrats, to the point that they now create scandals that would make them look bad only to whip them into something else. Like, it's crazy, right? Like, this is complete and total House of Cards, right? This is what they did. House of Cards was about exactly this scenario that we're talking about right here, right? So, all right. So I think I'm complete on my thoughts there. So I think that's what was going on. And then let's move into this sort of attempt to revive the attention towards the intellectual dark web, which is tied to this, right? Which is tied to the whole, reimagining the Democratic Party and putting Andrew Yang in charge and all that kind of stuff. So it's like separate but connected, right? So
1,000% connected. I don't think Yang would be he wouldn't even be having the support to run for mayor without the IDW and Brett and Eric pushing for him as hard as he did, and Joe Rogan.
Correct.
So yeah, you can't, they're inextricably bound, and they're all on the same payroll.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with the Peterson Brett thing, because I think Jordan Peterson is really obviously the most well-known member of the intellectual dark web. And then we'll work our way into the other thing, which is really largely the point of most of this and whatnot. But for people who are interested, they probably know this. And for those who either aren't interested or just lost track, Jordan Peterson for the last few months has been making a few appearances here and there, but then has really stormed back in the last few weeks.
Because he has a new book.
And he's been.
Well, I also think that's secondary. They're using him.
They're using it, right? Basically, they have reimagined what they're going to do with the intellectual dark web. And
it's so dark. It's so dark.
Right.
They're so appropriately named.
Right. And so depending on who you listen to, the intellectual dark web is either dead or going through some sort of reimagination or revival. I think it's mostly dead. But just, the same week that sort of Jordan reappeared, you had apparently Sam Harris saying he's turning in his IDW card. He's no longer a part of it. And then also Dave Rubin declaring it dead, basically.
And do you know why?
So I think the thing with the Sam Harris thing is like, I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, because I don't pay that much attention anymore, but he thanked Twitter for censoring Donald Trump. And that sort of went against the idea of the intellectual dark web, that we should have intellectual discourse or debate or whatever.
Even when I bought into the intellectual dark web, I never understood Sam Harris as being part of it, because he's such a demented, and I don't mean demented in a derogatory sense, but as in he's so skewed. He does not speak
in a derogatory sense. Okay. So yeah, I think part of it was just because he was friends with all of those people, and right. Sam Harris was really Dave Rubin's entree into recognizing that there was something a little wrong with the left or whatever, right? So I don't know either. I can't stand Sam Harris. I think he's the most boring person to listen to. I don't think he's that smart. I'm not saying he's dumb, but this is not someone with, in my opinion, such brilliance that we should all snap to and pay attention and listen. He's boring to listen to. I just, whatever, right? So I guess there were people who were part of the IDW, maybe who had complained about the fact that he said that and whatnot. And so what has happened with Trump in the last couple of months has also sort of torn the IDW apart, even though the IDW largely formed in response to the way people had lost their mind about Trump. So it had gotten to the point where the Trump derangement syndrome had also taken over some members of the IDW. And I think Sam Harris was like, I don't want to be part of this anymore because, or something like that, or that's what I got. And then Dave Rubin basically, he doesn't feel like, he feels like the IDW was dead because, like, while the people who are the more right, the more center or center right leaning members of the IDW have been able to make inroads and into collaborating and stuff with people on the right, the ones on the left side haven't. So like Dave Rubin is like a classical liberal sort of, although I think he's starting to acknowledge maybe he's more
libertarian
now or whatever. Like he became friends with Glenn Beck and Larry Elder, and he's done a lot of stuff with them, right? Who they're considered traditional conservatives. Whereas the people who are some more on the left, like the Weinsteins and whatnot, they haven't been able to bridge any gap with the traditional left media. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that was Dave Rubin's kind of thing. And he also didn't like this thing, what Sam Harris said, even though Sam Harris is his friend and it was sort of his entree into the new world that he inhabits and whatever. So, I mean, I don't know. It's all kind of silly and stupid, but I feel like, you know, to the extent that the intellectual dark web still exists, like the main members propping it up at this point are Brett and Heather.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and everything is kind of coalesced around them. They're the only,
as well as Eric, because I think Eric,
I don't pay attention to him anymore, so I don't know.
I don't pay attention to him either, but I think Eric was the first IDW guy to interview Schmachtenberger, who's now being brought in and used as part of it. And then he bounced from Eric to Dark Horse to the larger.
And I think that like Tristan Harris is now kind of joined the ranks, and some other people. And I think, unfortunately, the people who, I think in the end, the people who turned out to be the most sane and meaningful members of the IDW, and that being James Lindsay and Pete Boghossian, like they're not really part of it anymore either. They haven't specifically left it, but they have found their own, like James Lindsay is doing amazing work right now. Like he's amazing. Like he's really the only person in the IDW that I'm not like, you know, something about you really bothers me.
I always considered them IDW adjacent because he just strikes me as so sane.
So sane.
He's so consistently sane. And I just saw him, not to take us off track, but I just saw him being like thoroughly shredded on they tried to shred him on like a 3-hour anti-racism podcast, and he held his own like such an intelligent badass. Yeah. I mean, I already respected him, but they were trying to throw him under the bus, and he just handled it like a rock star.
Yeah, and so he and Pete Boghossian and Helen Pluckrose, they've kind of maintained they're gone, but they're gone, and I think they chose to be like, we're just gonna do our own thing, right?
And also I don't think they tried to work it. Like they didn't take it, because the amount of fame, like, and I know we're gonna get into it, but they all got so much fame so fast, and we're trying to pretend that it's organic. And I didn't see Lindsay or Boghossian taking that carrot.
So all this to say, like they have, you know, Jordan Peterson has come back, and Jordan Peterson is undoubtedly the most famous member of the intellectual dark web, and it would not exist if it wasn't for him. And you know, it's been interesting to sort of watch what has gone on with him. Like, to summarize sort of my feelings on Jordan Peterson, he was appealing when he popped up because he was saying common sense that needed to be said. It needed to be said. What he talked about as far as compelled speech, and then even some of, you know, basic stuff like, you know, maybe you should clean your own room before you go and try and fix the world, kind of thing, right? Because this is basic stuff. I don't think this was something we all should have gone ape shit over or whatever, but it was important things that needed to be sort of said. And I think that, like, as far as him being like a cultural icon, like that was it. That was his moment. And it kept getting extended and extended, and people were having conversations with him about this and that and the other thing, which were all things that he had addressed privately in small lectures and in his teachings over the years. But, you know, we're not necessarily like, you know, that, in my opinion, they didn't enrich or help the larger conversation that much. Not that they shouldn't be had, the conversations, but there was a lot of attention, in my opinion, paid to things that didn't really need to be. You know, and then he kind of, you know, like, and I don't know who was advising him on how he presents what he's presenting and how he represents himself in public. But at a certain point, something went horribly wrong, and he started to get sick again. Like, he struggled with health issues for most of his life. And he was like literally gone for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden it feels like he's been kind of plucked back in order to like provide some legitimacy to this group of people that are about to make some kind of leap forward. Like it's kind of like he, for all the people who are coming from either the conspiratorial side or the more right-leaning side that found the IDW appealing because of Jordan Peterson, like they needed him to maintain their legitimacy with those people, right? And so it feels kind of like dragging Joe Biden out of his basement to put together a coalition of team to run the world kind of thing. It's a very, and the more I sort of look at, like I was watching him in that interview with Brett Weinstein, I could only make it through 45 minutes, right? But my thoughts were like, you shouldn't like be doing this. Like he's pulling you into nonsensical conversations, and actually what you're saying, he doesn't make sense, and you're right, he doesn't make sense, but he's bullying you and he has more energy than you, and so he's kind of exhausting you, and it just did feel like torturing grandpa. But in watching how this is playing out, it's making me feel like, well, I wonder if they hit him with a bioweapon to just wipe him out, so that all of this other conversation that the Weinsteins have been bringing to the table for the last year and a half, 2 years could happen, like with their gained glory from the IDW and without any argument from him, right?
Yeah, I feel like you're right, because he's in such a weakened state. And I did unfortunately sit through the whole Dark Horse podcast with him, and I'm a little more than halfway through Jordan Peterson's interview with Brett on Jordan's podcast. He should be at home with his family. Like does not seem well enough to be doing this. And I feel like he's there to sort of act as a sounding board for Brett and to legitimize what Brett's saying. But there are so many times where Brett goes into the territory that he's being steered into by his handlers, and Jordan, like he doesn't have the energy to push back. He's like he won't take the bait. He's like, yeah, I don't know really why you're going there. It's really off topic. Like he will say that, but he won't.
He can't fight back.
He can't fight back. So Brett gets to shove a lot of stupid shit in without any pushback.
Completely, right? And there's always this thing, like this sort of synthesis thing going on where it's like there's a disagreement, but he'll make more of the part that they agree on, so then it looks like it's folding the whole thing into that, like we're on the same page.
Well, and I think it also gives Brett a lot of street cat cred, because he's spot on the compelled speech. He's spot on the anti-racism conversation. So he does have that. So this brings all that back up to show people who might not know much about Brett, or people who are in our conversation, like it gives him street cred that he really is misusing because of the larger agenda that he's serving right now. Do you know what I'm saying?
I mean, completely. And it's just trying to get some people who had kind of, like what happens now is people be excited about Jordan being back. So they'll watch everything he ever did like they used to, and they'll get sort of these ideas start to meld in, right? It's just slipping a little bit here and a little bit there and whatnot. And then suddenly people are sort of, even if they don't agree with or believe something, they're sort of following that content and they're getting used to the idea, because I don't think, for whatever the machinations are going to be, that they actually care if we agree with them. They're just hoping to condition us enough to the idea that we're not so repelled by it anymore. And this is part of that process.
Yeah. And I think what they're really conditioning us to get into, which I think we're going to get into later, is that these people are our intellectual superiors,
yes,
which is not true. But that's like, it doesn't even matter what they're saying, blah, 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 blah. But what they want us to agree on is that these people are way smarter than we are, and that we're sad, weak, little, half-baked, stupid people who should just do whatever they say. That's the purpose of all of this.
Well, and that we would agree this is that they would want us to see them as smart, and for whatever our criticisms may be of them, they're not as gross as the ruling class that exists now.
No, and they also want us, I also feel like the other piece is to like fuel the indoctrination of the academic system it's like, again, trying to breathe life into the legitimacy
Yeah.
of these dead patriarchal systems. So you have these two professors speaking in this like antiquated, academic way, and we're supposed to translate that into, oh, they're smarter, so I'm going to do whatever they tell us to do. Yeah. Which is weird, because the people that they're aiming to convince are the people who are trying to smash the patriarchy, but everything that they're like, this whole structure that's coming through is the old patriarchy.
Well, even worse than like that is the thinking, well, I don't really love this, but because it's slightly better than the other option, it's really okay. We can't really ask or expect for more, right? Kind of thing. Right. Like that's even more demoralizing. Okay. So do you have anything else to say about the Jordan Peterson aspect of this? I don't. I feel like he's a sick guy, and this is like cruel.
I think it's cruel. It's the same thing I thought when they first rolled out Biden as a candidate, where I'm just like, they're just using these old men who are not well. Jordan is so emotionally not well. He should not be on camera. He should have support and help. A couple things that I do want to just mention. One, I was shocked to hear this out of Jordan's mouth, because usually in the two that I've seen, Brett will talk about the virus and the whole thing, and Jordan will be like, yeah, I know you're really into that, but I don't know what you're talking about, and he'll change the subject. But Jordan did say, well, from what I've seen, Israel's doing a great job with their vaccination program right now. And I thought that was amazing, that like, wow, you're really going to praise Israel in this moment for what they're doing.
When they're doing exactly what the Nazis did, which half of your career is built around the things you say about Nazis.
Yeah, so that was nuts. Another thing that I see them using them as is to establish Brett's, like they're trying to make him seem like a centrist, and like he's not beholden to the leftist agenda. So I think because Jordan has come out as a conservative, they're really playing that bipartisan thing quite a bit.
Right.
And then, I guess we are going to get into their actual conversation, right? Because the certification piece is so super important. But the other thing that I want to say, just to jump on what you already said, and I don't mean any disrespect, because I do love Jordan Peterson. We went to see him in person, and I think the bulk of his message and his content is valuable. I don't think it's original. I don't think it's anything radical. I think it's useful, and I think it's valuable. But I don't. Oh, go ahead.
It was the same. It was a sane intellectual saying something that needed to be said at a moment it needed to be said. And
exactly.
It got captured. Yeah.
Exactly. But I just want to be clear, because so much of what we're about to get into rests on these people's intellectual superiority. And I don't think Jordan Peterson is that smart. I don't see him being very intellectually nimble. You can see in the conversations, like he can talk about what he wants to talk about, but he really can't pivot or move or play or like improv. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I think Jordan Peterson is probably a really good psychology professor, right? He's able to take the concepts and arrange them in a way, because you can watch his face. He tries to take the concepts and arrange them in a way that makes sense to him and he can understand. And then once he does, he then has something to say to other people to help them understand. He's probably a good teacher, which is what he originally was. He's probably a good teacher. These people are all probably reasonable teachers, but when you start to elevate them to the role of social icon, then the wheels start to come off.
100%. And I just want to speak to, because I know you didn't see the one on Jordan's podcast, but he opened the interview with rehashing the whole evergreen thing. That was probably the first 15 minutes, which again is Brett's whole
credibility.
Like, that's his entire credibility.
Yeah.
And what I think is, I think it's interesting, like allegedly he and Heather, what, did they get fired? Or I guess Brett got fired and then Heather quit and then they lost their tenure. So they both lost their jobs at their college in Tacoma, Washington, which is a suburb, which is infinitely less expensive than living in the city. And after they both lost their jobs and lost their tenure because of this reverse racism thing, they chose to move to Portland, which is the belly of the beast, which is the heart of where all this racism shit is coming from, when allegedly they were afraid for their lives and it's infinitely more expensive. So, I mean, right off the bat, I find that an extremely curious response to the false flag that sets up the whole thing that they're setting up right now. And at this point, I don't even know that it happened, because I did hear Brett say, I heard that students were looking for me with weapons. And before I thought I didn't know it was something he'd heard secondhand. I thought he was running for his life. But now all of a sudden it's a rumor, which has me wondering, did it even happen?
Well, it's so, all right. I didn't know you were going to go there with this, but it's like, okay, I don't know if they got fired. I think what happened was like they reached a mediation agreement, right? And that then Heather got folded into it, because obviously she wasn't going to stay if he didn't. So I don't think it was like a you're fired, but I think it was like a, we're not going to make it safe for you to be on campus, is at least the story that I sort of understood. So they went to like an arbitration kind of thing. And the agreement that they made is that they would get $500,000 over the two of them. They would give them, the university would give them $500,000 total and then move on, right? And that's kind of what happened. As for your conspiracy theorizing, no, I think I can't say that the entire thing is a hoax or completely fake, but there was definitely at least a staged element to it. And then I'm going to say a gain of function element to it, because, you know, Brett loves to talk about gain of function studies, right? And as one of our titles from this episode last year or something was, I think, gain of function studies are the new active shooter drills, right? Kind of thing. Like, we don't actually get pandemics if we don't do gain of function studies, just like we don't get school shootings unless we have active shooter drills, right? So, yeah. So
I just want to be clear. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm saying I'm questioning whether it did. I just want to be super clear. I'm in the I don't know, because I'm also rereading Robert Anton Wilson. I believe nothing.
Yes,
I believe nothing.
That's the best place to be in. That's funny. We talked about Robert Anton Wilson yesterday on the Glass Bead game. But so okay, so yes, there's something is not kosher at the deli. Like, let's just keep it in Jewish terms, just to piss people off, right? Something is not kosher at the deli all the way through. And I see, so the people who are like, not the people who are pulling the strings, or they're certain level bagmen, right? Like, let's just say you're George Soros's, right? They're there to fund multiple levels of the issue, right? So sure, they would prefer that it all stay systemic. Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, blah, 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 same old crap. But they understand that even the dumbest, most thick-skulled members of the public at a certain point are going to go, well, something's a little funny, right? And so you have to have something that is seemingly like more natural, more organic, better, more honest, more truthful, seemingly being the key word here, ready to go at that moment when that other thing becomes no longer viable, right? And then you have to have a level above that that's even more like honest and more whatever, right? And so that's where that's when we get these people that we can't quite understand, because there's things that they say that sounds good, and then they say this other stuff. And it's not that contradictions can't exist in human beings. They certainly exist in myself and yourself and whatnot, but some of them just defy logic. If you're trying to say the person is this kind of person, but then also this is going on, right? But most people, once they've finally been like, you know what, I don't think I can trust Hillary Clinton anymore, like, it's going to take them several years to figure out that there's a contradiction in a Brett Weinstein or Tulsi Gabbard or an Andrew Yang. Right. And so then that will be 10 or 15 years that they have to sort that out before they have to bring in someone that's marginally better than those. Right. And so that is why so many NGOs and so many operations and donating money to so many organizations. So literally you have a puppet for every show. Right. And so I think that's what's going on there. And all right, should we move to the next Brett Weinstein issue?
Yeah, the last thing that I just want to say that because I've been taking notes on these, is that I did notice a shift in Brett's languaging patterns when he was talking to Jordan Peterson, and he was using words like deployed tactical. There was a lot of war languaging that all of a sudden, from this radical, traditional liberal, all of a sudden this war speak is seeping its way into his own personal lexicon where it hasn't been before.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting observation. I don't have a clear thought on like why that might be, but one of the things I have noticed about Brett, for supposedly being like a soft hippie liberal or whatnot, he's incredibly conniving and sort of like that kind of thing. Like he's like that, like I can see him doing that, right, kind of stuff. So, and then Heather just plays like, well, I don't know, man, like that sort of.
Although what I've noticed, whenever Heather makes comments about stuff that we talk about, she gets really angry and she talks about it with this like attitude and edge that is kind of out of character for the rest of the way that she'll do her podcast. Start to pay attention. It's really funny. I'm like, oh, she's talking about Emily and me. And she's mad.
Okay. So now, do you want to stop here and make the other part afterwards? Or do you want to just keep going and make it all one thing?
Let's split it with afterwards. Oh, one last thing on which is, I think this will lead in well to the Marxism, to the afterwards, is that in his Dark Horse interview with Jordan Peterson, Brett kept bringing Marxism up. And you could tell Jordan was like, I don't know why you keep bringing this up. Like it was totally off topic. And the one thing that he said was like, when people talk about Marxism, they only talk about the bad stuff.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And I'll say this, there are some reasonable things about Marx's analysis of stuff, but the ism developed around him in order to combat the like with a lot of the case with a lot of these leftists, right? Their analysis of what the problem I can usually get mostly on board with, but then like the thing that they come up with is the solution. I'm like, huh? It's like when I see, I talked about this in a show last week, when I'm like listening to some really good music and somebody's doing some like totally out of sync moves, and it isn't even because they're necessarily a bad dancer, it's just like they're doing their own interpretive stuff. I'm like, I don't know how you get that out of that, but I get this out of it, but all right, carry on, right? So it's kind of like that. Okay, so let's do this. Let's take this opportunity to, so I will see, like I'll try and put this up on YouTube. When I put it through the checker, it usually will tell me if there's going to be a problem or not. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube, even though I said earlier it might not be, then that's why. I'll check it out. But if not, we'll let's take this opportunity to, I'm going to post it on my Patreon page as a free post in the public part. And I'm also going to post it over on my locals page. And everyone, even if you're a patron of mine, even if you follow me on YouTube and you like that or whatever, go become a member at the locals. It's free to be a member, right? The paid content is like a supporter content, and those are locked for people that aren't supporters. But everything that you see of mine that is available on YouTube that is free is also free over on locals, which is kind of like a combination of YouTube and Facebook, right? I can make social posts or I can post videos. And right now, the public stuff, I use a YouTube video there, but for the private stuff, I use Vimeo. So if for some reason we ever have a problem with YouTube, I'll just start posting public Vimeo videos there as well. So that's a place you'll always be able to find my work as well as words. And then the paid content will be there for supporters, but we will make this first part available free, both on Patreon and on locals. And then the afterward section, because we think it's important to the entire conversation, from the point that this post goes out, will be available for free in both places for 24 hours. And then we'll put it up as supporter content after that. So if you like the show and you want to watch the afterwards content, just hit it right after you're done watching this. It'll be up for 24 hours from the time we post it for free there. And my locals page is emilymoyer.locals.com. Sometimes, like, to find it correctly, you have to put in the whole https:// and then emilymoyer.locals.com. And of course, you can find stuff on patreon.com/offplanetmedia. Dani, tell people where they can find your
okay, so I'm posting on BitChute. which is BitChute Dani Katz. I'm also still in the process of uploading to the Words channel that I've created on Odyssey. So be sure to subscribe there, and you'll find this there. You'll find the afterwards, same thing, 24 hours free on my Patreon if you're inspired to be my patron, Patreon Dani Katz. And also, if anyone watching is a medical intuitive, please reach out to me. Thank you.
She's got a hand problem, right? Okay, so yeah, so we're spreading our content out into a variety of different places so that we got our bases covered. So go hit subscribe at all of those places and that will be good. All right, we're going to afterwards. We'll see you on the other side. Bye.